How are you doing? Tell us how you're doing personally.
Personally, I think I'm doing okay. You know, I had a screening in Kiev for my new documentary that I'm going to be releasing this Sunday, The Unevacuatables. It's over an hour long. It comes with a embed with a guy that I would just say is a little out of this world.
Big Red 512 got a tier 2 subscriction.
He's a little out of this world, huh?
Thank you so much for the tier 2 sub. Yeah, he's a little out of this world. He's a Dnipro kid. He grew up going to Russian-speaking schools. His father fought in both Afghanistan and Chechnya. Even though the Ukrainian-speaking school was closer, because he was a Dnipro kid, and his mom thought that, you know, Russia's the center of the universe, Moscow's the center of the universe, broad strokes. And therefore, if he wants to make it anywhere in this world, he's got to go be able to work in Russia. And so he had a very positive view of Russia going into this war. And then when the big invasion happens, he sees a lot of destruction. He sees a lot of the damage. And this, you know, this simple kind of, I guess you could say, tough guy from Dnipro. You got to watch the documentary to understand the type of person he is. Ended up evacuating tons and tons and tons, hundreds of people from places like Mariupol, from places like Svetohirsk, and doing it under insane conditions, sometimes not wearing body armor, using like a Moskovich, beating up cars, no tires, just the rims of the cars, dragging people out of frontline cities like Svetohirsk, which was fought over brutally between Ukrainian and Russian forces. And I decided to go on a bunch of embeds with him after he saved a friend of mine called John Jones when we were bombed in Kherson. And I just got to know him more and more. And the more I got to know about him, the more he fascinated me. He fascinated me because of his background, because I think just like the identity he comes from kind of counters a lot of Russian propaganda narratives, like the idea that this is the guy that's supposed to be the prime candidate for the Ruski Mir, and he is the one cleaning up the destruction and a lot of the damage from that empire. I think it's interesting because he is not your typical aid worker. He's very, I would say he's kind of rash. He can be very, how do I put it? He's very energetic. He can be very kind of abrasive to some people. He's like a guy from Dnipro. And if people know people from Dnipro, then I think people understand what I'm trying to, what I'm pushing towards. He's not the type of person you stereotypically think would be saving lives, but because of his circumstance and the opportunity he was given, that's what he ended up doing. And I think that's an interesting angle to it as well, and something I wanted to cover. And the last big angle to this that I was really interested in and really makes me love this documentary, because this is really, I would say, the first long-form documentary that's one semi-full narrative arc, outside of maybe the artillery piece, but that was a bunch of conversations with different artillery teams kind of just strung together, is that he is somebody who is going to locations where all the people that could have left have already left. And so the people he's talking to don't want to leave in many instances. And we got to record about 15-minute conversation, and it's the pinnacle of the documentary, where he's trying to convince the people who refuse to evacuate, including waiters who are waiting for the Russian army, trying to convince them to evacuate, and you get to hear their mentality, you get to hear their perspective. And a lot of these people have many different reasons for not wanting to leave. Some don't want their kids to be drafted. Others, you know, have lived in these frontline villages for their entire lives, maybe never even leaving like within 100 kilometers of this area. And now at age 89, you're telling them to leave for the possibility of never returning. Some don't really care either way what happens, like who controls what. They just want to stay there no matter what. Some are even sympathetic to the ongoing army, or have, in a lot of instances, family over the border, and they just want to be able to see them again, husbands and wives and stuff like that. And so being able to show a lot of these perspectives, even including the hard-headedness of some of these perspectives, of somebody saying things like, you know, well, what does it matter if I die here or if I die in Kiev? You know, well, what does it matter where it's like, it's a lot of the mentality that you can only really see born under these conditions, because nobody on day one of this war would hear those types of words or hear themselves saying those words, and I think like accept them on face value. Just the type of conditions that have forced them or like pushed them mentally to accept that mentality. And that's something that really interests me, trying to talk about this conversation that gets very, I mean, cover this conversation that gets very little attention in the Western press, the Western English-speaking press especially, and trying to give it a little bit of nuance instead of just the broad strokes you'll get in a 30-second clip on CNN.
Literally, or oftentimes it'll just focus on some military gain or loss, you know, or like the last big mainstream news coming out of Ukraine was the attack on the Children's Cancer Hospital, the ballistic attack. And unfortunately, stories like you just explained, or down in the southeast in Kochtanivka or Drzdivka, they're getting hit every day. Like artillery's coming in, destroying things, and it's that's just not going to make the news unless somebody like you is there, you know, documenting it, or a journalist is there. But oftentimes they're just not that close. You mentioned Svitoritsk, that the big overlook with the Artem statue.
Oh, Svitohirsk?
Svitohirsk, yeah. Is that different than the city you were talking about?
You mean the statue of the worker, and he has this like arm in front of him, and it got hit by the Russians like a little bit. Yeah, I've been there before. That's a beautiful overlook. It really, I love that. I love that overlook. It's nice up that mountain.
Yeah, that's where we had went to. We spread Pete's ashes. I was wondering if that's what you're referring to, because the Ukrainians had the position on the hill.
He evacuated people from there in a van with no windshield and no tires.
Goodness. And he had no plates or anything. He was just regular, huh?
And a lot of this, he does not have plates. And I remember when we went to Chasiv Yar to evacuate people out of Chasiv Yar, you know, when the situation started getting really bad and the Russian army started getting really close, they were on the city's outskirts. When we were in Chasiv Yar, we were getting to the city. Hey, Westside Tyler Raiders. Welcome, everybody. Westside Tyler. Hey, Westside. I saw you want to be on Hippy Dippy. I registered that. I'm mulling you over and considering you with many other people, but Danabelle wants to talk to you about Hippy Dippy recruitment. Thank you so much for rating. I appreciate it. And hey, General Iro, thank you for the 5 gifted tier 1 subs. I appreciate it.
Big Red 512 gave Drudyism a tier 1 subscription.
All the love today.
Now you can spam dicks too.
Dylan Love Tuesday.
Thank you, Big Red, for the tier 1 sub. On top of that, my goodness, the random love, Mercado. Random love. What was I saying before I got distracted by the money, the raids, and all of the support?
I got distracted by the money, raids, and support too. I'll be honest. We were talking about Svitoritsk and the overlook and the guy who was
but no, when we were in Chasiv Yar, I remembered it now. We were about to go into Chasiv Yar. And this is as the Russian army was right on the city's outskirts. The city is getting bombed. Every inch of the city is getting bombed over and over and over, constantly 24/7 at this point. Everything's within range. Artillery, I think even like 120 millimeter mortars was in range of where we were going and what we were doing at this point. And as we go in there,
Brandon M has spoken about the people that remain quite a bit. Boils down to the best and brightest left.
You said Hippy Dippy and people started freaking out and started just donating.
Yeah, I said the words Hippy Dippy and everybody had like a money spasm and they had to.
Exactly.
People want it back. People are excited that it's coming back. People are very excited.
It's good. It's good.
But as we were in VR, he gets out of the van and he brings out this body armor and it's broken. It's broken body armor. You can't wear it. The plates will not stay in it because the holder is so torn up and it's just not working. And I'm like, this is my third embed with you, and this is the third time you're not going to be able to wear body armor. So he's like, so he just gets some duct tape. No, not even duct tape. I think it's like some strong scotch tape, and he starts just taping the body armor together and then taping that body armor to his body physically, torn up and all. And he's like, boom, look, no helmet, just a baseball cap and ready to go in.
No ear protection either. Does he have any ear protection on?
I've never seen him wearing ear protection.
Like, what is ear protection? What is that?
What is ear protection? But we also get to interview his wife and talk to her about some like safety decisions he makes and stuff like that. So it was really interesting to get perspective from other people outside of him about him.
Dope, dude. That's one of your projects you're working on right now, or is it just
it's done. I've already premiered it in Kiev. It was premiered this last Sunday. It was a private showing.
Nice.
Where we had some journalists come out. Francis Farrell from the Kiev Independent, he showed. I know Philip Mittner, he came. I know you're familiar with Philip. Rick the Ukrainian, he showed up as well.
Philip, Rick.
We had a Ukrainian general come. We had some other people come. We had a nice little guest list.
That's good.
And they seemed to like it, and so I was happy about that. And so now we're ready to show it to the public. So we're going to release it next Sunday. And I want to thank everybody who supported me on Patreon and through demonetization, because I couldn't have funded it without it. So I appreciate it.
How do we watch it?
It'll be released on, Sunday on my main YouTube channel, Dylan Burns TV. Not my second one, Dylan Burns Live, but my main one, Dylan Burns TV. And I think I'm going to set it to premiere. It's just a question of us finishing the thumbnail, so we can't put it up yet. So the Sunday.
Oh yeah, we'll have to check that out. I'll probably react to that, watch it. Good Sunday Dylan special stream. I think that'll be awesome. How long is it? Is it like a full?
It's an hour and 5 minutes.
Chat, an hour and 5 minutes of Dylan and some good content there.
I think maybe there's 5 minutes of Dylan. It's almost entirely focused on Dima.
You said you're working on other projects. I don't want to say how many there are in case you're trying to keep that in. Yeah.
I have a 24-hour embed with at a stabilization point in the Donetsk region that I'm going to be releasing probably the week after we release this. So it's going to be next Sunday. So not this upcoming Sunday, but the Sunday after. And then by the end of the month, I'm also going to be trying to release some mortar night missions. So we were on the Lipsy axis next to Volochansk when the Russians were attacking down in Kharkiv. And we were with mortar crews just a few kilometers from the Russians as they were working on night ops. And so I filmed what those were like. I interviewed some soldiers that have been fighting back even before Euromaidan. I mean, not fighting, but in the military before Euromaidan. And got to film what it was like out there at nighttime with all the Russian Lancets and glide bombs and all that stuff flying around. So that's the immediate stuff I'm releasing.
Anything new you've learned in this round of embeds and documenting? Any new experiences?
Any when you say anything new, do you mean stuff about the current situations, just life lessons?
I'm sure. Yeah, maybe. I mean, yeah, any of that. Yeah, anything personally that you've learned, growth wise, journalism wise, war wise, you've learned maybe something new about the war.
I learned that the Ukrainians right now around Pokrovsk are because I was in Pokrovsk very recently on a grad mission. As they were, firing at attacking troops, that the Ukrainian troops over there are exhausted. That's the first thing. Yeah. The Ukrainian troops over there are to some extent just understaffed and overstretched. And while a lot of people are, talking about what about this new mobilization wave? I heard the mobilization wave was coming. Those people are still being trained, and if they're going to be trained properly, it's going to take time. And I'd much rather, and I mean, I think most people with sense for the people who don't want these people to have their lives wasted, want to make sure they're trained properly before they're being put out there. And so those soldiers are probably not going to be ready until, maybe, November. So, I mean, we're talking after the election, we're talking 80 to 100 days. Hopefully they get that type of training. Maybe it'll be rushed to some extent, and they'll get them out there sooner, but that position of being overstretched is just difficult for the Ukrainian troops out there to deal with. And what many people thought, including me, could have been the point of the Russian offensive in the Kharkiv region, while they didn't take Volchansk, they didn't take Lipsy, they did overstretch Ukrainian troops, and that is having an effect because now they don't have the reserves that they could have committed to that area. There's some people that are doomering about it hard right now because the Russians have been able to take 6-7 kilometers in a week, which is a lot compared to what they were taking before. Obviously, if you compare it to the early months of the war, it's still way under what the Russians originally wanted, but compared to the scrap heaps and the outhouses that were being fought over and people were bragging about capturing during the Battle of Bakhmut, this is a speed that is concerning. But I do want to throw out there a few things. One thing is that the Ukrainian defenses are going to be tougher as the Russians continue to advance, that a lot of these smaller villages, you know, when the Russians are attacking, they're attacking a village that has 20, 30 defenders. And what they're doing is they're parking their vehicles 5 kilometers out, having all like 200 guys dismount, and then they'll have them charge in. Maybe they'll lose like 50 guys or something, but like 150 guys, even if coming from bad defensive positions, over time, if you just do that again and again and again, they'll take those positions. And that's what they're doing. But there's going to be better entrenched positions around the area of Pokrovsk, because the Pokrovsk is an important logistical center for getting supplies to Konstantinivka, getting supplies to Chasiv Yar, getting supplies to Toretsk, getting supplies to all these locations. And if they were to lose that, that would put immense pressure on all of those locations where the Ukrainians are currently having defensive battles, as the Russians are putting immense pressure there. And that's why 50% of the clashes are towards the Pokrovsk area. They want to take that passageway of supplies, so then it gets easier to pressure the rest of Donetsk and continue in their conquering of the Donbass. And so that's the grander scheme that Kharkiv could have been involved in. And even if that wasn't the intention, that was the effect, is that they are overstretched. And so this next month or two is going to be pretty difficult in that area. That's why I think people should keep an eye. But as November comes around and more troops fill in and the winter starts to set in, we can expect that there's a good reason to believe that these advances will slow down, the front will freeze, and with more, you know, troops in these villages and all of these being defensive battles from more defensible positions, that they shouldn't take Toretsk, hopefully. But that's me, of course, being hopeful.
Right, of course. I just got back from Ukraine 2 weeks ago now, literally 2 weeks ago today, and we went to multiple frontline cities. Kherson, went to again Kochtinivka. We had to go. Actually, we couldn't go through Pokrovsk, Mitrograd, or Mykolaiivka. We had to go up over it through the Dobropilia and then back down to get to Zaporizhia. And you're absolutely right. Like I saw with my own eyes, the rear defensive positions are solid. So the Russians, while they're gaining ground right now, regardless of how far they get, it will come to a stop completely because of what Ukraine has built. Because they have had time now to build these rear defensive positions, whereas the current zero lines aren't. They're just Ukrainians fighting. I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's just they're holding their positions. They're not really the most well built. They're holding like village
houses and attics and whatever they can make with like a small shovel. And if they're lucky, those excavators, those small excavators they get out there, that I know groups like Constantine are like working to fundraise for.
Exactly, and it's crowdfunded stuff. So, I mean, the zero line defenses, again, Dylan just explained it, but the further one that are kilometers back are like, the Russians aren't going to penetrate that. Multiple lines of Dragon's Teeth, trenches, big pillboxes, concrete, like World War II level pillboxes, like it's just not going to, and the sight lines too are just incredible that Ukraine has. So it's solid there, but if you're paying attention to the map like my channel does, I know Dylan calls me the map channel sometimes because I cover maps for way too long sometimes, which I understand, though, not to focus too much on that because you can become a doomer at that point. But we are going to be seeing more advancements in the Avdiivka direction, but it won't last too long. And like you had said earlier, training these troops does take time. You got to realize I served in the U.S. Army, or any U.S. Veteran can speak on this. It takes months for us to train, like the U.S. military. I joined and went to basic training on October 16th, 2012, graduated like January, I think it was January 20th of 2013. It takes 4 months to train a U.S. soldier, and I wasn't combat arms or anything. I was just a truck driver, but still, that's still 4 months of training to be in the U.S. military. Now you got to imagine Ukraine trying to get their soldiers through and get them trained properly and not be useless on the front lines, be effective in their units. I've been seeing too, there's like some civilian programs that like Azov's running. My friend operator Mike, I call him. He's my camera guy. He's my operator when I'm in Ukraine, and he actually went through this like civilian course to kind of like familiarize them with like military culture and some trainings and some challenges. Have you been seeing more of that pop up, like trying to engage more of the civilian population with the military?
I mean, there's like weekend training programs where people can like train over the weekend how to handle a rifle and stuff like that. I know of people who are volunteering based on the fact that they know that there's a shortage, and so they feel that it's like their turn, and they've I think put it off enough, and maybe they'll like engage with these programs first, or maybe they're unsure if they can do the military stuff and they'll engage with these types of programs, medical programs, but these aren't even necessarily for military life. Obviously with the bombing of hospitals and stuff like that, understanding how to apply a tourniquet can become like a basic skill that's useful for everyday survival. So yeah, usually stuff like that, stuff that's just basic infantry stuff that's usually good for everything. The basic medical stuff, they're usually good for everything. And I think this is good that they're concentrating on stuff that's going to be useful for everyone. Like if they just had like random mortar training out there, and then you get in the armed forces and there's not enough mortar ammunition, everybody needs to know how to handle a rifle. Everybody needs to know how to counter a drone. But the big thing that they do specialize in, and everybody's advertising, is drone stuff. People feel more comfortable piloting drones than holding a rifle right on the front. It's alluring. It feels like the kind of like the front of the war, kind of the front of cutting edge science. And knowing that you can kind of train on it on a video game system is also very useful. And from my conversations, I just got back. We were in the Kharkiv Oblast also filming with Mavic teams, and there were so many glide bombs in the air and Lances in the air. They're really a problem out there. But when I was talking to them, they were telling me that so many younger people that it's way over dominated by younger people, because they just have like the hand-eye coordination from playing video games and stuff like that much better than the older individuals. And I said, who's the oldest guy you know who pilots drones? And he said 59. And I said, oh, is he good? And they said, no, he's terrible. He's absolutely terrible.
It's tough actually to fly those things, especially the FPVs. They have like a school too now, and I wish I would have got to just go and see it with NAFO when we went, but they went back to something that I've already done many times now. But the FPV training is unreal. Like I get motion sickness, I guess I do, when I have those goggles on and the frame rate so fast, and they fly it so fast, and it's zipping and doing maneuvers and everything, and I just getting motion sick. But it's almost kind of like a pilot training with these things, basically, to get yourself acclimated and familiarized with like the feeling of flying that thing too.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed piloting in the games and stuff. I was decent at it, so at least I know.
See, I told you got a future in FPV cat food delivery in your future.
Absolutely. I'm going to take all of the skills I learned here about FPVs and I'm going to bring it back to make a fat buck in America.
I swear,
either doing delivery programs or assassinations for the mafia.
Whatever one works best.
Yeah,
I can fly a Mavic. I can fly a Mavic drone pretty good now after all that. I never thought I could.
Did you just try dropping one of the things?
No, that's level 3 training. I gotta graduate from the tutorial still. Then I can get to that one.
Understood.
So I had a great one for you, and I just can't think of it. People just kind of want to know the situation. Okay, I remember it now. Artillery. So when I was there and I was talking to units, and this was just 2 weeks ago, and I'd like to know your updated perspective, that artillery wasn't reaching the places that it needs to, and it's not reaching the units that it should be, or it's not enough, basically. Still, what is your assessment of the artillery reaching Ukraine?
It's hard to know, because sometimes when you're talking to soldiers, and I'll ask them like, how's the artillery situation? And to some people, when I ask that question, they, number one, people are scared to answer, to say we have problems because of how it might make a commander look, or how, like, if it's giving like secretive information. A lot of people are nervous in front of cameras of saying like, oh, we have 22 artillery pieces of artillery ammo, and then that calculated, and then the reason that Kiev falls is because this soldier said they had 7. People catastrophizing in interviews. And a lot of people also like judge it relative to what it was like 6 months ago, 7 months ago, when it was super, super bad. And so they say, oh, it's not as bad. And so they say, oh, it's not a problem compared to what it was. But people need to remember that from basically the start of this war, Russia has had a massive disparity of artillery over the Ukrainians, and that hasn't changed. And just because it isn't as bad as it was when aid was literally being held up in completely partisan politics for no national security justification, when both sides of the aisle agreed that it was important, both the Republican Speaker of the House, the Democratic Minority Leader, completely partisan politics. It's not as bad as it was then, absolutely, but it's still the same problem as it was before of the Russians having a big disparity in artillery ammo. And in some instances, that's useful when it comes to how quickly they burn through their gun barrels and how they have to cannibalize their artillery, and how articles like The Economist, but people have been talking about this for a while, how that leads to them having a deficit and them having to cannibalize more of their material. But in the vast majority of circumstances, even if you're dealing with the most shitty of North Korean artillery, that will kill. And if it doesn't only kill you, a lot of these operations are meant just to suppress you. When I was on the BMP mission in the Serbernitsky Forest, that's another piece on my main YouTube channel. That was released like 8 days ago, if people want to check that out.
Check that out.
It was an indirect fire mission. BMPs are not designed for indirect fire. They're designed to be the armored backbone of mechanized assault that characterized Soviet offensive warfare. And that meant carrying troops to a position. The troops jump off, they run, say, yaw, and, attack, and it provides covering fire. But we were like a few kilometers away from the enemy, firing, hoping the BMP shells hit the position. And, maybe it did, maybe it didn't. It's not going to be as effective as mortars and the rest of it. But I mean, that type of indirect fire is not only meant to kill them, it's just meant to make them go, oh shit, and get down. And now they're not firing at you. They're not trying to kill you. And it also means that they hate every second that they're in the country and want to go home.
What are you seeing, if any, or how can you compare? I don't even know if you could, or maybe you can assess the Russian side of things. We just talked about how it's going for Ukraine, and not really like on the up and up right now. Ukraine's holding where they're holding.
This is how I put it. Right now, it's the worst it's gonna be for a bit. It's right now is like we see the way out with mobilization. We see the way out with winter stabilizing the front. We see defensive positions that are eventually going to be reached as the Ukrainian position trades, to be honest, trades land for lives, which I think most people that I've had conversations with would prefer. And
I just said that
we don't want to have to see a bunch of Ukrainian troops, because I've already seen one video like this of Ukrainian troops getting in front of a camera saying, we will not take this insane order to take back a position without artillery support, without mechanized support, and we cannot do that, and we will not show our brothers and our... That stuff collapses morale. So instead of like giving like impossible to achieve orders, keeping a realistic perspective, I think right now is smart. But I don't want people's realism to transfer into doomerism, because I was talking to people who have been here like 10 years, like at a party after my premiere, who were saying Pokrovska's going to fall, then this is going to fall, and this is going to fall. And I was listening to him, and I respect him immensely. And we respected each other's work, but I was like, you're falling into doomerism because of just, how the situation feels right now, the vibe on the ground, how on the parts of the front in Donetsk where they are, there's like 10 shells every one Ukrainian in some certain parts. And that micro image can create a macro perspective that can be very doomeristic. Just as like if you're in a bubble on social media and you're just getting all the bad news or all the good news, you can start to believe like Douglas McGregor that Ukraine's going to fall within 48 hours, or you can believe like oh man, I don't want to. Or you can be like, I don't know, like Sarah Ashton, and be like Ukraine's like North Korea, like champion of
Burns is in.
We're gonna this hole in the ground will stop the Russian army. Whatever you can be either end of the spectrum.
Yeah, I by accident too. I made the mistake of reporting the news, and this was back when the Russians.
No,
I know.
No.
I'm sorry. I know. I fucked up.
Don't do that again.
I made the mistake of reporting when Russia had advanced through Avdiivka and were starting to occupy villages. And Sarah was like, "This guy's lying. No, the Russians are being pushed back through Donetsk right now. Like we're there." I was like, "Whoa, dude! I don't know. Like, man, I don't know if I personally share that, Sarah.
You want my honest, brutal opinion?
Of course, this is why we're here.
So, Sarah Ashton, from my experience, was very interpersonally nice when I met them. But sometimes when I'm watching their feed, I feel like I'm on the DPRK news station for Ukraine. I remember there was this one video that just like perplexed me. And it had to do with defensive positions in the Kharkiv Oblast when there was that scandal when the Russian troops went over the border and there's certain defensive positions that were not properly prepared, and it's still very murky, and a lot of it's probably not even information that can be shared with the public. But the point is that there's a lot of stories about how there wasn't defensive positions where there should have been defensive positions, and that they weren't properly prepared. Now, the Kharkiv breakthrough never ended up amounting to much, and they never took Vovchansk. They're still fighting over there, and people are fighting and such, but thankfully it didn't lead into anything else. But I was looking at Sarah Ashton's like Twitter feed about it, and I saw her like jump into like a hole that could have been dug within like 72 hours, and said, oh, they say there's not defensive positions in this direction. But look at this hole that, and I'm not shitting you, I know 59-year-old men who are in service right now who could have dug that hole, given enough encouragement and nonstop energy drinks within a 24-hour period. That is not the defensive positions that we're committed to. If that's all it took to defeat the Russians, the war would already be over. And so when I see posts like that, it just makes me like not trust that type of state-affiliated news sources, which I, as a journalist, I'm inherently skeptical of these types of news sources to begin with.
Of course,
but it just feels like too rosy. And look, it's a war. Information warfare is part of warfare. She is working for the Ukrainian armed forces. She is part of their information warfare machine. It all makes sense. She's serving what she believes is like a purpose that is of extreme importance, which is liberating Ukraine from Russian occupation, which is extremely brutal. All things that I'm unbelievably sympathetic towards. But as a journalist, my end goal is different than her end goal, which is I have a dedication to what is true so I can inform people to what reality is. And that doesn't always match up with information warfare.
It really doesn't. And I'm actually kind of personally going through that phase right now where I'm trying to shed, because like when I do my journalism and I do my on the ground reporting, like I absolutely don't talk really. Like I just interview or let people answer my questions, or I just show, like, you know, like, so oftentimes what I'm filming is enough. Like I don't need to really narrate over it or speak over it. So I'm managing like that, but then also being here at home. And then obviously we kind of do similar things where we go through the current events and news and give our takes on things, and people like, well, but you were out in the streets and you weren't giving your opinion and you were way better then. And it was like, well, that's I'm like giving you firsthand information there, and I'm at home, I'm giving you kind of like my recycled opinions on other people's work. So I feel like it's kind of I'm trying to like find a symbiosis there, like a connection that I can like be happy with on both fronts of that. How do you balance it? Because you do the same shit.
Because I am very passionate about doing the original work to contribute, because if I'm just commentating on what is already in existence and all I feel like is I'm just drawing from a bunch of existing sources and repackaging it and delivering it to other people, I don't feel like I'm contributing enough to the conversation to warrant opening my mouth. And I think a lot of being a streamer is being a massive egotistical prick. And I fulfill that, I think, enough to at least achieve some job. But I don't feel like I should be talking about every subject unless I have something to contribute. And a lot of times I felt like I had to talk about subjects in order to like be within the space, in order to be able to find stuff that, you know, is going to bring in viewership, even stuff that I'm not caring about at all, like drama. So I need to find the balance between talking about stuff that I may not have like a deep focus in, but will be useful for me to even do that, because repackaging information can still be useful if it brings it to an audience that needs to know that message, while also dedicating enough time to do what I'm passionate about, which is creating original content, which can help write the first draft of history, which is what journalism is, and which is what I want to be all about right now. And so trying to find that balance right now is very difficult. And trying to integrate like all the people I used to create content with into that balance is even harder, because nobody wants to come with my ass out here.
Yeah, no one wants to go to the front lines of a war zone or get hit with tear. They want to sit and do podcasts at home, which I guess is cool. But I mean, I don't know. It's a tough balance still to learn for me. I mean, you've been doing frontline war journalism longer than I have. My introduction was BLM riots and getting tear gas and flashbanged by cops for like 2 years straight. And that was not the most fun experience, but then now I'm kind of branching out. But I guess it's true. It's the ones that'll go out into real life and the ones that will talk about real life but stay at home and keep their content to that, I guess. And then also like trying to figure out like who in the community like of this is.
By the way,
like
I think this is good. By the way, I don't want like Tucker Carlson to actually be out here and try to interpret reality, because if he does that, there's so much stuff here that you could like clip chimp just like you do on stream. You can do it the same thing with reality. And Tucker Carlson does that with his documentaries when he's working with Fox. Other people do that, where you can take a 30-second clip of a conversation, post it out there, not include the full context, not include what brought that person to that perspective, and then you can paint these people who are literally putting their lives on the lives for what they believe in a very negative way, or in a very propagandally like good way, like whitewash them to an extent. And it's so honestly, while I do wish more people got on the ground, there are certain people that they should just stay at home.
I agree, and just do their propaganda at their house. So now we haven't talked in a while, actually. It's since we've been on stream. So, and because you do also spend time on your stream covering domestic U.S. news and events and politics as well, which is awesome. And I'm glad that you do that. I'm glad that you're also like on the ground in Ukraine, covering a massive geopolitical war right now. That's very important. And they're also covering current events back home here. Now, let's just start off with, okay. So I've seen an increasing number of conservatives that are Ukraine supporters that are trying to find a way to support Trump. They're just trying to find one still. Like the cabinet of Trump or the administration they could support. And he chose J.D. Vance as his running mate for the presidency. What is your take on J.D. Vance in regards to Ukraine? I know there's a whole lot beyond that, but let's try to keep it around Ukraine.
Bob and Whack, thank you so much for the 2 gifted tier 1 subs. I appreciate that. J.D. Vance, in my opinion, I can't make which way, I can't figure him out really. And it's not that I don't know what his stated positions are. I don't know if he believes in anything. Now, that doesn't mean he can't still have positions. You can believe in nothing and still have positions because they benefit you in some way. But within 2 years of the 2016 election, when he was saying Trump is like Hitler in private conversations, he compared him to an opiate. And mind you, J.D. Vance is from Ohio. His mom dealt with drug addiction. My mom dealt with drug addiction. So I can understand that type of hatred you can have for opiates from that perspective that he comes from. Calling Donald Trump like heroin, like an opiate, is basically worse than calling him Hitler, the devil, or anything itself, because you're calling him the thing that takes away from you. It's the thing that destroys everything you have. And when he's saying that, when he's saying he's a never Trumper, he'll never like the guy, and said that he was anti-Christian, made him embarrassed to be a Christian, said all this stuff. And then within 3 years of that, he's on the campaign trail begging for his endorsement, saying that Donald Trump's like one of the best presidents this country has ever had. So you've gone from he's Hitler to one of the best presidents this country's ever had. There's multiple ways you can talk about that distinction, and either of them are bad. Either if it's, oh, well, you know, I don't believe he's Hitler anymore, and you just change your mind that quickly. Or the other one, which I think is maybe a little worse. So I don't know how much he believes anything, because it's not that I don't believe people can change their mind. It's that I don't believe that people can go from like one end of the extreme to the other end of the extreme very quickly, unless you're a very unstable internet person. You know, somebody that's unstable, like a teenage radical that's gone from like a Marxist, Leninist, Maoist to like a fascist Nazbol overnight. As I've realized
that pipeline's pretty quick. Yeah, I realized that pipeline can go pretty quickly. It's faster than I thought it would.
Yeah, but this is something for like 22-year, like maybe like maybe like 22-year-olds at the most, not JD Vance, who is right now the youngest person on any ticket. And by the way, Donald Trump is the oldest nominee in presidential history. So when we talk about the vice presidential nominee, it is important to talk about J.D. Vance, because Donald Trump just dying on the shitter like Elvis is not an entirely impossible thing to believe. At the age of 78, we've had presidents younger than Donald Trump who have died with less low problems than Donald Trump who has died. Mr. Kokenberger, I don't think is like, look, point is, J.D. Vance, due to Donald Trump's age, is even more important to think about, because Donald Trump is not completely unlikely to die while in office. It's not that he necessarily will. It's just he has a higher chance than the average president. Now,
my chat's saying, Dylan, you're wrong. Reagan was 80 for 40 years. So
not when he was the nominee.
True.
So Donald Trump will be older than Reagan when he leaves office. Donald Trump will be older than Biden is right now when he leaves office if he wins. That's so crazy. Talking about JD Vance,
it's crazy to think of,
is more important than usual, because if Donald Trump kicks the bucket, JD Vance is now making foreign policy because he's the chief executive. And so when people talk about Donald Trump as, you know, a good option for Ukraine, I saw people Lost Cause. Thank you so much for the five. It was those tier 2s. No, they were just 5 tier 1s. I still appreciate it.
Corrupt.
Vance doesn't believe in anything. Thank you for the $5, JP. So when we talk about like the Mike Pompeo plan, or we talk about any of these other things, we need to start from the starting point of Donald Trump could very well just die in office and then hand over the presidency to the most anti-Ukraine senator in the Senate. The guy who simply said, Russia's bigger than Ukraine, so Ukraine can't win. So therefore, give up the land. You have to make a deal. It is what it is. Somebody who is against any and all further support to Ukraine and has expressed that again and again and again. Somebody that when he was originally running for Senate against Tim Ryan, and I remember I was working for 21st Century Democrats at the time, and so I remember following the follow up to Tim Ryan, like climbing up to like run for Senate, and while following that race, watching JD Vance come out against Ukraine aid, saying literally, I don't care about Ukraine. That's when he said what he said when he was running for the Senate position. And then after he said that, the Ukrainian community in Ohio my God,
Vance
people just throwing money around. Thank you. The Ukrainian community in Ohio got angry. They put out an open letter, and he responded saying, "Oh, no, I support Ukraine. I support Ukraine. I support Ukraine." Then he won, and then he dropped him. And now he doesn't care anymore, and he goes back to what his original position was, his honest position was, which he said on the podcast, which slipped out, which is he does not care about Ukraine. He holds no principle to Ukraine's defense, and he holds no ties to anybody who's negotiated Ukraine policy in the past. So he can't like commit himself to like, he's not committed to any of the plans of like continuing to support Ukraine. He's not openly committed. He's not voting in favor of it. So to be clear, when you're voting on Trump, if you believe Trump is going to support Ukraine, which I don't even believe, but let's say you've somehow put yourself in that position, you're voting for him under the assumption that he will, oh my God, not die as the oldest person to ever be in that office ever, with a bunch of chronic health problems and one of the most divisive, hated presidents in the United States, right? That nothing's bad's going to happen to him, and that JD Vance is not going to replace him. Or that, 4 years down the line, JD Vance isn't going to climb up the ladder and become president and then, set a tone of like anti-Euro-Atlantic skepticism or anti-Euro-Atlantic
pro-couch
advocacy,
politics.
Being crouched up. And so just on JD Vance alone, I'm worried about Trump, but also remember, Donald Trump has been reported to have, and I do believe this, be very easy to influence when it comes down to the second of making a decision, where a lot of times the last person, the last thing somebody says to him is the thing that he ends up doing. Some people say that's what happened with Syria. Some people say that's what happened with the JD Vance pick, because it was his kids, Eric and Don Jr., who convinced him when he was going to pick Doug Burgum that it was a terrible idea and that they should go with JD Vance. So if JD Vance is the last person to whisper in his ear, what does that mean on any of these national security issues? What does that mean when it comes to childless people not voting?
Right. It's weird because I think from a strategic point, and also I'm a former Republican and I come from that land, Burgum would have been the better choice, because a ton of were just questioning conservatives that were like, I might vote Democrat this year. I think they would have pushed them more to vote for Trump again.
Absolutely.
Just because I'm
Nikki
voting for Burgum. Nikki Haley would have been. I would have packed it up
because
for the election.
Haley is not going to sign up to some fucking moronic fake elector spot. This is my friend Gary. No. He decides who's president. Let him decide who's president.
Literally. So I just thought it was diabolical L when he chose JD Vance overall, because even just then covering the war, and I see what NAFO is posting and seeing the memes all the time, and it's just they've already shown that JD Vance is a Vatnik or pro-Russian completely with his narratives, or even just to the point of I don't give a shit about Ukraine in the interview. Now let's flip it to the Democrat side. Joe Biden dropped out. Again, we haven't talked in so long. This is great. Joe Biden dropped out. He's no longer going to be the front runner for the Democratic Party. Kamala Harris is now the front runner. What are your takes on her policies or anything for Ukraine? Positive, negative? What do you got?
You know, I'm leaning towards, I think worst case scenario is she keeps the Biden-esque policies. But the first thing, but let's talk about some other scenarios, because this is a moment, this is an opportunity, this is going to be a sweep of the highest executive offices when it comes to decision-making on foreign policy issues. Secretary Lloyd Austin's going to go, Anthony Blinken's going to go, and Jake Sullivan are going to go. They're all out of it. We already know this. He's probably going to be replaced by, in some capacity, the National Security Advisor Kamala Harris currently has, I believe his name is Goodman, who is very anti-Assad, believes the United States should have intervened more to basically cap the guy and get him out of there, and believes that we basically gave them a W in Syria. Now, he's also, of course, in support of Ukraine. He wants to continue to support Ukraine. How far he wants to go into that support, I mean, I don't see enough like explanation on like specific issues, like, for example, striking deeper and hitting air bases. And so I can't talk about those commitments. But what I can say is that he certainly, when I was reading his pieces about Obama on Syria, is somebody who wanted to be more aggressive on the matter. I don't know if that's going to transfer over into Ukraine as well, or if it's going to transfer anywhere else. It is a possibility. This is an opportunity to, but I certainly do not think he's going to regress from where the Biden administration is. Say something like, oh, you can't fire over the border. Right.
Like it's not going to get worse. It'll just either be the same, or hopium will cause for us to think it could get better.
That it'll go forward. Kamala Harris is also somebody who has generally not been like somebody who's been very supportive of Ukraine. She went to the Ukraine Peace Summit. She has had personal conversations with Vladimir Zelensky. She has that relationship already developed. So she already has probably some understanding of what the Ukrainians want. She has a relationship already developed with them. So these are all the things that make me believe that I don't think she's going to like flip around and become like Jill Stein on the issue. Whether or not she's going to be more aggressive or go further, it's harder to say. I'll say on one hand, Ukraine aid is basically been put off as an issue until after the war. So if Kamala Harris was to win, one of the first major challenges of her administration, foreign policy-wise, is going to be getting another tranche of Ukraine aid through the door and sent up there. And until I know who these like secretary positions are going to be and who's exactly going to be in which position, I don't know how that's going to go. This is part of the reason why I want people like Waltz, even though people talk about Mark Kelly because he's pro-Ukraine. Waltz, because Tim Waltz is somebody who has experience being the governor of a state of Minnesota, who has a very slim Democratic majority, but is able to make a lot of progressive Democratic change. And even if you don't agree with the progressive Democratic change, for example, the free school lunches or any of the other policies that he's done that I'm quite a fan of, you can say that having that slim majority and being able to legislate a lot of this policy and get it done to making Tim Waltz a very popular governor in his state and certainly very popular among his supporters, to the point where some people don't want him to leave to be vice president of the United States.
I don't want him to leave Minnesota either. It's my governor.
Makes me think that somebody like that might be useful in a position where Kamala Harris is maybe going to have to be, again, the oppositional position of Democrats standing up for the Euro-Atlantic relationship and making good on our commitments to Ukraine and helping them defend themselves legislatively and getting it through. But I don't believe that there's going to be some like downward shift in support for Ukraine. I would even lean, from the little bit I've read from national security advisors, that it might be in the other direction, that they might see it as an opportunity to try to take some steps forward. If Biden doesn't take those steps forward for them in the unrestricted 6 months he has left.
Yeah, that's the other factor, is he can make some, and I told this in my stream too, if he's going out, like, he can make some strong decisions while he's going out for president. Allowing Ukraine to strike those bases would be a big alley-oop for Kamala Harris presidency too. Like, look at now take it from here. Big decisions, but I'm hoping they can happen a lot sooner and faster. I had another comment too to make. I have to think of it right now, but you were pretty much nailing it on the head. Tim Walz is also serves in the National Guard, so he's like military and understands military completely. Yeah, our economy in Minnesota is lit all the time. We have a surplus constantly through everything, like through all the struggles the U.S. itself has had. Minnesota does well. We have great fucking healthcare, best healthcare in the entire U.S. completely. Tim Walz has done a really good job in Minnesota. Shapiro, I think, from Pennsylvania would be another good one.
Shapiro's a good pick in Pennsylvania, but there's like a looming like sex scandal in his office that I'm a little concerned about. There's also like Shapiro might be divisive on the issue within definitely the very progressive part of the base when it comes to the issue of Israel-Palestine. But I do think Shapiro is very popular in the state of Pennsylvania, and if you are of the belief that so goes Pennsylvania, so goes the nation, Shapiro is a strategic pick. If you believe that those other issues are not going to be anything that undermines him. I think Mark Kelly likes good on Ukraine. He was a big advocate of the F-16 program. If he's VP, I mean, I could see him like pushing Kamala Harris further, and I would say if he was picked, I'd feel more confident on some of the like pro-Ukraine direction, because then you got Philip Gordon as national security advisor, somebody who believes that Russia took a W in Syria when they shouldn't have. Then you've got Mark Kelly as VP, somebody who's a big advocate on the F-16 program. And then you've got Kamala Harris, the woman who was sent to do the Ukraine Peace Summit when Joe Biden was too busy doing fundraisers that eventually dried up anyway. So if you put those ingredients together, it sounds like a possibility for change in the positive direction. But I will say about Mark Kelly is he was very, very slow to get on board with the PRO Act, and it was only when the unions pressured him during this VP nomination run that he jumped on board. And as somebody who comes from a union background, I do got to say that even though he jumped on board and that's better now, the dragging of the feet on those issues, the lack of enthusiasm is something that I am not too excited with. So I don't know about Mark Kelly for sure, though.
I feel it. Yeah, I got to examine because I didn't know anything about these guys prior. Obviously, I know a lot about Tim Walz. He's my governor. But yeah, I got to look into that and examine it more now that I'm like settled back into home, because a whole lot happened while I was in Ukraine again. Like last time I was in Ukraine, October 7th happened. Now I'm in Ukraine again. Trump nearly gets assassinated. Like I'm like, fuck it. And then I got to like react to my Ukraine stuff and then get home and react to all of this. So I got to actually do some more independent research on the potential picks. I think she should be announcing her choice in the coming days, correct?
Yeah, it might be the governor of Kentucky, which is the one I know the least amount about, and is the one that I am the least confident in as a pick. Honestly,
who's that one?
Andy Beshear, I believe is his name.
Oh, is Pete Buttigieg any good?
He's not in the running really, and he would be. I don't know if he'd be a smart pick. I just don't know what he brings to the table. I mean, he's from Iowa, I guess, but I think the
It's from Iowa.
I think the big thing, honestly, that would stop him from being a pick is not only the fact that he's not from like a strategically important state, which is part of the reason why I'm not very confident in Andy Beshear pick, because I don't see what he brings. I mean, at least Tim Walz, we're gonna win Minnesota. But I mean, Tim Walz has shown like a skill when it comes to like fighting the Republicans like verbally and being able to advocate for his agenda. He was the one who coined the weird attack. People should be giving him the credit for that. He's got a successful legislative agenda that he can campaign on that I think is popular, and it's concentrated on issues that I think working class people care about, is like tabletop issues. He's got a legislative record, but like Andy Beshear, like he's like popular to like rural folk in a way that I think they might appeal to him, but he's from Kentucky, and I just don't think he's, I don't know. I don't think he'd be the worst pick. I just don't think he's the best pick.
We're going to lose a good one if Tim Walz is because he went literally, you know who he went against was Dr. Sir Scott Jensen, I think his name was. And this guy was the embodiment of MAGA conspiracy theories. Like that's what he ran on completely, all of it. Like nothing actually, no like centrist Republican policies or like conservative for America, for Minnesota. Scott Jensen completely ran on schizophrenic everything MAGA, like the worst of it, and got destroyed. Like he got like nobody wanted that shit except for like northern Minnesota was really advocating for him, and Tim Walz called northern Minnesota the land of rocks and cows, and that made them really upset up there. They got really fucking mad. So but it didn't translate into votes though. It just was loud Facebook noises. But yeah, Tim Walz definitely knows how to navigate these people in terms of these people being MAGA and whatnot. He sure knows his way around that. He knows how to his way with words, and the weird attack. That shit was so good.
The super PACs have picked it up. Kamala picked it up. Everybody picked it up, and like
I picked it up.
The Republicans,
I love that.
Don't really know how to respond to it. You know,
no, they're like, we're not weird. I know we are, but what are you?
What's weird? Michelle Obama being a man. It's like, okay, buddy.
Yeah, or some stupid. Oh yeah, do you know what's weird? Fucking trans joke number 6789456 that they came up with today. Like literally, I look at my Facebook comments and they only know how to do like make fun of trans people, and that's it. Like that's the immediate first one, like that one, or some other crazy just crackpot. Like, oh, you're just obsessed. You have Trump derangement syndrome. I'm like, no, I'm just sharing memes, like the same shit you guys do, but it's actually funny now. I don't know. I've tried to tap out of the whole online internet political culture, but it just brings me right back in. Like, just when I thought I was out, it brings me back in, and I just can't stop.
You can't get away.
Literally, I tried. I escaped on Saturday for a little while and took the day off, but then I'm right back. It didn't go anywhere. It's still here. Back. Any other that'd be shit. The Trump assassination. We didn't really talk about that.
Old news.
Do you have any?
Old news.
Old news now at this point. It's old news now. It's crazy now, right? Literally. All right. So that's old news. Put that into the file cabinet folder. Yeah, we're really just kind of waiting for Kamala to pick her vice president, and then we get to have a lot more to talk about and like dive into the policies and principles of that person. The one kind of syntax question I have for you that I can't remember right now: will we find out her cabinet before president? Well, like her choices for the cabinet before the election.
We should get some general idea of at least some of the top picks would be good.
Got you, Adam.
But Trump, and actually he's very famous for holding out on this. Trump didn't do it in 2016 because he probably thought he was gonna win.
That's why it fucks.
But that's now he's still not doing it.
You're right.
He's
not.
He's still not doing it, even though now he has an idea of like he might win and what he would need to do. And it's part of the reason why when people talk about Project 2025, it's nothing. Trump's denounced it. If Trump doesn't pick a lot of his appointees, this is what I imagine is going to happen. He's going to have an idea of the big guys: National Security Advisor, Secretary of State, Press Secretary, Press Secretary Alex Jones, whoever's going to be.
Laura Loomer.
Yeah, Press Secretary Laura Loomer. Lauren Witczynski, whoever it is. And then after that, he's not going to have any idea about deputy of undersecretary of who gives a fuck. He's not going to care about that. And so it's going to go to big groups like the Heritage Foundation, which are preparing lists of people, of loyalists for these organizations to fill them up with. And if their plans of replacing what are supposed to be nonpartisan bureaucrats,
Project 2025
bureaucrats goes through, they're the only one that's going to have this infrastructure and planning in place. And it's not like Trump has denounced people and then took them back on, or distanced himself but then undistanced himself later when it was convenient again, like Michael Flynn. He was kicked out quick because of the lack of loyalty to the United States. But I've heard from Donald Trump over the phone when Michael Flynn was showing him during one of his rallies that he's back in the next administration. So it's something that concerns me, that's for sure.
Yeah, it does. I mentioned it's in the Project 2025 chat. It basically non-political positions in the government will become political positions, and that means then if say this person doesn't follow Republican ideals or whatever, then they'll lose their job because they're no longer politically aligned with the whatever. It's the worst idea ever, because there's thousands and thousands and thousands of people that work government jobs that are they might be personally partisan in their own personal private life, but their job does not require them to be a partisan person or politically at all, but yet they're still working for the government. And that's how people can work across multiple administrations and become an expert in a field across multiple administrations, because it's a non-political partisan job. Question about the F-16s, Dylan, really quick, with Ukraine. Anything on that? Anything?
I mean, the idea is supposed to be here before summer's over, maybe start of winter. That's the idea of when it's supposed to be in the skies. Some people are saying there's rumors about in the coming weeks, but I've heard rumors like that before. So, just pay no mind to it until eventually it's in the skies.
Exactly. At this point, it's because it's just going to keep people oh, they're there yet? No, I'm sorry, they're not. I'm trying. I wish they were. $10 from Johnson says, bless you both. Non-religious slang, as a brother would say to another. Thank you guys for your work and unwavering support for Ukraine and the truth you speak about American politics. Yeah, it's more like facts. Truth is objective at this point now. It's more like just speaking facts. Facts with evidence.
Facts
with evidence attached, receipts, and yeah. But yes, I'm emotional sometimes, for sure, definitely. Especially nowadays. I'm open about it, though. I wear it on my sleeve. Yeah, that's anything else that's really you got. We're kind of just, it's an attrition in the war right now overall.
Thank you so much for the primer. I mean, yeah, attrition. When we talk about like the Russian perspective, because you're asking me about like the Russians earlier, and I think you can wrap up on the Russians, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Their problem right now is manpower, and I'm going to talk about this later this stream because I've got some like posts pulled up from like pro-Russian war blogs and like testimony from Russian soldiers. They're cannibalizing people from other parts of the armed forces, you know, people who were in mortar crews, people who were working in the Air Force, and they're cannibalizing them in order to push them into infantry positions to try to keep on the pressure of some capacity. A lot of these volunteers who are getting paid exorbitant amounts of money are being sent into these attacks now. The prisoners are still being sent, and it's coming with very high casualties. And if you are to believe the replenishment rate data that the West talks about, the best case scenario for the Russians right now is that they're meeting replenishment of manpower. But if they want to expand to increase pressure, that's going to be a problem. And so they can't expand, they can maintain. And with time, as they continue to lose like these exorbitant amounts, 20 to 25,000 people a month, either wounded or killed, then eventually people will stop coming. And for each, to keep the rates they got now, they have to keep increasing the prices. And so it's not just a question about will people sign up? It's a question of how much will it cost to continue to just keep the numbers you have now, because the prices are going to continue to increase because the more coffins that come home and the more manpower you burn up of people who are already willing to go, the less you have in the future. And Russia's already got a labor shortage, meaning that it's not just a problem of cost for this industry, for the war itself, it's a cost of, you know, people getting to work in the other war industries, which is the only part of the Russian economy that has expanded. And the only reason that they have any positive GDP growth is because it's all the war economy expanding, which is not good for long-term economic health, by the way, because once that goes under, when the war's over, Russia's going to have a slump that's going to be very painful. So there's a question of, can they sustain this? And when it comes to manpower, for the moment, yes, but that will have increasing costs with time and become harder to sustain with time. When it comes to tanks, when it comes to BMPs, when it comes to artillery guns, to put it quite simply, no, they cannot sustain current loss rates due to the fact that they're blowing through these gun barrels with the amount of artillery shells they're firing, the amount of artillery guns they're losing in the field, the fact that a lot of the artillery guns replacements they would have had are being cannibalized, their gun barrels are being taken out to replace their gun barrels out in the field, the amount of tanks that they've burned through, the amount of BMPs that they burned through. They can sustain offensives through the summer. They could even maybe sustain offensives into early winter, into some parts of the winter, even though that's going to have increasingly diminishing returns. They have diminishing returns. But come around 2025, there's going to be a moment where they're going to have to continue to either decrease the amount of armor they're using or see the armor that they're putting out into the field, if they want to sustain current operations, just degrade further and further and further of quality. And that's already happening. So the latter option is happening right now. But unless they're going to be putting everybody into T-54 out in the field with like 20% T-90s, 80% T-54s or something, then they've got to find some way to diminish those armored losses, because they just simply don't have the production to replace what they're losing. All they can do is pull out of Soviet storage.
Oh my God, it's a attrition war, attrition political news too. We gotta wait for more. It's kind of just like we're in the valley of despair. That's what I was looking for right now. If you what's that, the graph, and things are gonna get better, but we're in the valley of despair right now, and that's just what it is. And we'll get up there. Well, resiliency. You just gotta stay resilient, you guys, and we'll get there. You just gotta. There's very tangible things that can change and that can turn this thing around. And I'm hoping that these decisions are made. Striking Russian bases in the Russian territory for sure. More artillery, making NATO help facilitate the artillery getting through Poland and into Ukraine, and making that constant. And not like here's some artillery. There you go. Best of luck. We'll hit you up in 3 months, and maybe we'll get you more. Maybe it needs to be continuous, and then also the internal situation as well.
Yeah, mobilization. Mobilization. Sustained aid from overseas. These are the two big ones, and political decisions and electoral outcomes. These are like the things that are levers that are really hard to account for at this point, and it's part of the reason that anybody who tells you that they know how the war is going to go, when there's so many factors that could go either way depending on outcomes that you cannot account for, no matter how many. If you can have 13 keys, you can have 14, you can have 15 keys, you can't account for all of this.
Exactly. All right, Dylan. Well, we'll have you on again. Actually, next time I kind of want to talk about Venezuela, focus that, because shit's going crazy right now, and lots of people are focused on that, on Venezuela. Lots of people that I don't really like are talking about it, so I'd like to talk about people that are based on most things. But right now I'm seeing it's like Jackson Hinkle versus Elon Musk, and I'm like, what kind of fight is that? Like, what
Jackson
the fuck
Hinkle
is even
decided
that?
he was going to go to Caracas, Venezuela's capital, and film in like basically empty grocery stores and be like, wow, look, there's food here. Everybody told me there's not any food here. The average Venezuelan makes just over $200 a month. To feed a family of 4, it costs about $350 a month. How do you cover rent? How do you cover water? How do you cover the rest of these expenses? Definitely, if the food in there is going to wipe you out much quicker than the food that's going to be of a lesser quality that can just get you to that money. It's the Tucker Carlson bread thing all over again. It's just you're relying on a lack of people's basic economic knowledge, which I don't know. I mean, of course, we can blame them, but I also blame the American education system.
True. Of course, we're debating over Greek gods and Christianity. That's a whole other topic, though, for a whole other day. With the same people that can't figure that out are trying to get rid of education, the Department of Education in the U.S. All right, Dylan. Well, great conversation. How can people find your documentaries and work that are coming up?
You can find that on my main channel, Dylan Burns TV. That's DylanBurns TV on YouTube. It also gets posted on the main page of my website, DylanBurns.tv. And if you want to see my live stream content, you can visit my second YouTube channel, DylanBurnsLIVE. And you can watch all my streams at my website as well, or subscribe to me on Twitch or follow me there.
Big Twitch energy. And again, to Dylan's chat, Mercado Media, check us out. We're similar to Dylan over here. Dylan's obviously in Ukraine way more than I am, and he's well connected with units and does amazing embed documentaries. But I go when I can, and we cover news over here. So consider Mercado Media. Thank you, Dylan. We'll talk again very soon, and I'll catch up with you. Talk about U.S. news and all that, and Venezuela, because apparently we have to.
That's right. Sound good, man. You have a good one. Bye.
All right, Dylan. Take care.
I am back. Back on the attack.